Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered with Sid. I'm Rose Sid Verma, and I've been thinking about this weird conversation online for the past few years that the world hasn't really felt the same since 2020. People blame different things: the pandemic, politics, social media, AI, isolation, whatever the scapegoat, whatever the reason may be. A lot of people just seem to agree on one thing: that something changed, that the world just feels different. Not necessarily worse in every single way, just a whole lot stranger. Like everyone's a little bit more cynical, a little quicker to argue, a little less willing to give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think people are only talking about the pandemic. They're talking about the feeling that somewhere along the way we stopped sharing the same reality. It feels like you can take one news story, one 30-second clip, one headline, and show it to two perfectly intelligent, perfectly normal people, and they'll come away believing different things happened. Not because one of them is lying, not because one of them is stupid, but because they're starting from completely different versions of reality. And that's pretty strange to think about, right? Because growing up, I had a completely different expectation for the internet. I think we all did. We all knew, we believed that the internet was going to make us smarter. And honestly, it did, right? If suddenly everyone had access to all of humanity's knowledge, if all of humanity's knowledge was right there in the palm of your hands, then people would naturally make better decisions, right? Information used to be scarce. If you wanted to learn something, you'd go to the library. You'd crack open a book. You'd read through an encyclopedia. Then the internet came along, right? Google, Wikipedia, YouTube. Now, every single piece of information that you could possibly ever want to know about fits inside of your pocket. So the problem's solved, right? Except I don't think that's what happened because today we have more information than any civilization in history, and somehow we're less capable of agreeing on what's true. Does that not seem so backwards? So maybe we misunderstood what the real problem was, and we just solved the wrong problem. Because think about it, for most of human history, the scarce resource really was information. Very few people had access to information. Today, the information isn't scarce, it's vast and abundant. But attention, your attention, is a scarce resource now. That's a completely different world. Every app on your phone is competing for the same thing. They not all of your apps want your money. Not all of them want to know your opinions, but almost all of them, every single app on your phone wants your attention because attention eventually becomes money, right? The longer you stay, the more ads you see, the more profitable you become as a consumer, which means that these companies aren't optimizing for truth. They're optimizing for engagement, for your attention, right? And here's where things get interesting because the algorithm doesn't care what you believe. It only cares on what keeps you watching. But the algorithm isn't evil. I don't think our algorithms are brainwashing us. I think that's way too simplistic of a way to look at it. I think they're doing something a bit stranger. They're observing us. So imagine this. Someone followed you around for like 6 months, right? They wrote down every video you watched, every headline you clicked, every post you shared, everything you commented on, everything you sent to your friends. Eventually, they know you pretty well, right? They know your character, they know your persona pretty well. That's basically what recommendation algorithms do, right? They discover what captures your attention, and then they give you more of it, again and again and again. Not because they care about their radical opinion, not because they're trying to promote something, or not because they're trying to promote some sort of different perspective, but because engagement, your engagement is the business model. The problem is that human psychology wasn't built for that. So here's where things start to break. So imagine this again. You're scrolling through TikTok. You see a 30-second clip of two people arguing, or maybe it's a protest. It could be like a police encounter. It could be like just some random dude yelling in the grocery store, right? Within 1 hour of that being uploaded, there are millions of views, hundreds of people in the comments, people saying, this proves everything I've been saying. You watch it yourself. You have your own emotional reaction. You might comment on it if you feel brave. You can send it to your friends and explain to your friends what you think about it. You can give your friends your own 2 cents, right? You've taken a side. And then 3 days later, The full 10-minute video comes out. And turns out the original clip left out a lot, right? Maybe it wasn't enough to completely reverse that story, but it was enough to make it a lot more complicated and add more nuance to that original story. But here's the issue. Nobody's going to change their mind. Not because we're stupid, but because we're human. So why don't we change our minds? Well, one thing psychologists have known for decades is that public commitment changes how we think, right? Once we've attached our identity to an idea, letting go of that idea becomes incredibly difficult because now you're not just admitting, oh, no, I misunderstood the video. You're admitting, no, I was wrong. And that's uncomfortable. And if your friends all believe the same thing, changing your mind and sort of like turning your back on them can feel like you're leaving your community. So instead, we defend our beliefs, not because that's true, but because it's ours. And that's where I think the internet became so dangerous, right? It didn't invent confirmation bias. It didn't invent tribalism. It didn't invent motivated reasoning. Human beings have always had those things. The internet just gave those instincts infinite fuel. And one philosopher, one thinker I love to think about, but one person that I keep coming back to is John Stuart Mill, because John Stuart Mill never saw this coming. John Stuart Mill believed in something called the marketplace of ideas. I think this was from his book On Liberty. So basically, if people are allowed to openly debate ideas, eventually the better ideas, the truth emerges, right? And honestly, there is truth in that, right? I also think that internet quietly changed this one assumption his theory depended on. Mill imagined people discussing ideas before deciding what they believed. Today, it's the opposite order, right? We see a clip, we react emotionally, we tell everyone where we stand. Then after we've already picked a side, the evidence starts arriving. By then, our identity is already involved. We're not evaluating information anymore. We're defending ourselves. So this definitely plays into our ongoing culture war, right? One side sees one version of reality, the other side sees another. Sometimes liberals circulate clips that confirm every fear they have about the country. Sometimes conservatives will do the exact same thing. Each side is going to accuse the other side of being brainwashed. Each side is going to think that the other is denying obvious reality. Sometimes one side really is missing the context and it has its facts wrong. Sometimes it's the other side, right? But more often than not, everyone is reacting before the full picture even exists. We've become so incredibly fast at forming these opinions, but we've gotten slower at revising them. So there's another author named Jonathan Rauch who wrote a book called The Constitution of Knowledge. And one of his central ideas is that healthy societies rely on institutions that slow down knowledge, right? Journalists, scientists, editors, courts, peer review, all these things are fundamental to the process of knowledge trickling down, right? And these weren't perfect at all. Sometimes they got things horribly wrong. Sometimes they were biased. Sometimes they excluded marginalized voices. But they did serve one really important purpose, and that was delaying judgment. But today, that delay has disappeared, right? Now the order goes, upload, react, share, argue, and then fact check comes at the end. And that's if we ever get to the fact check part. So I don't think the internet destroyed truth. That's not even possible, right? Truth still exists. Gravity still works. History still happened. Reality is still reality. But is the process that allows millions of people to slowly arrive at reality together? Maybe the internet didn't break truth, but it definitely broke a consensus, right? And those are two very different things. Because societies don't function just because truth exists. They function because enough people agree on what counts as truth, what counts as proof, what counts as a reality. And if we lose that, we don't just disagree more. We lose the ability to solve problems, pressing issues together, right? And that's the part that concerns and worries me. Anyway, those are just some thoughts I've been sitting with lately. I'm really curious what you guys think. Did the internet make society smarter, or did it simply just change the way we think? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.